641 traffic.
641.
Willie Zebra David, 954, going to be about Stafford and Albina.
Good afternoon. So in 2006, I was working for the city of Portland as a police officer. And one summer afternoon, I was working a partner car and we got into a vehicle pursuit with a bad guy. And I'm talking to my partner in the car and we decided to pit the car. And as soon as we did the pit maneuver, I was going to get out of the car in case bad guy ran. Well, a pit maneuver I don't know why you'd know this, but a pit maneuver is when you take your patrol car and put it on the rear wheel well of bad guy's car and you turn into it, causes it to spin out. And if you slam on your brakes, the patrol car stays right in front of bad guy's car, keeping the threat in front of you. So we did it, performed the maneuver. I got out of the car and I'm standing in the intersection. Bad guy gets out of his car and instead of running, he drops to a knee behind the door jamb, and as he's dropping to the knee, I can see his right arm make a motion to the small of his back. So I'm standing in the middle of the intersection, I have my gun out, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to happen right here. So I started yelling at him, giving him commands, screaming more like, to show me his hands, and as I'm walking up on him, when I get about 10 feet from him, I see his facial expression change from anger to more shock and awe, and he turns and makes a motion to the driver's seat and then walks to the back of the car and puts his hands up. And we were able to take him into custody without incident. And on the driver's seat was a loaded Desert Eagle 10mm handgun. And when I talked to him at the precinct in questioning, I asked him why he didn't shoot. He said because he thought I was crazy. So that worked out. Thanks. And in 2009, when I decided to leave law enforcement and go to the financial services industry, I was kind of disappointed, would be the best way to describe it, because I thought that all my training and experience that I learned as a police officer was not going to apply. And I figured there was a lot that weren't, right? So like tasing somebody or using an AR-15 or physical takedowns were probably not going to apply. And if they did, I was probably doing something fundamentally wrong in my practice. So as a new advisor, I had a very basic understanding of how to talk to your clients. I was asked the typical question, what would you like to accomplish? What are your goals? But I felt I was leaving a great deal of opportunity on the table for the client engagement and me growing my practice. So I started thinking back to when I was a police officer for any type of skill that I could pull from that to help me as an advisor. And after going through all the ones that I knew for sure weren't going to apply, I landed on my adaptability and my presence. And I felt that okay, if I could sit down with a client and be adaptable to their situation and have a professional presence while doing that, that would be a very good start. And the benefits of me transferring that skill were almost immediate. I started having deeper, more meaningful conversations with my clients, which led to an increased number of accounts per household, from 1 to about 2 to 3, averaging 7,200 GDC. That number increased again when the clients paid us to go through a financial plan, from 2 to 3 to 5 to 8, averaging about 13,000 GDC. So we were really moving from the salesperson to the trusted advisor. Now, how many of you in the room came from another industry into this profession? Okay, so about half. Well, 50% of all new advisors coming into our industry are coming from other professions. And I believe that we can take a look back at those skills that we had, like mine as a police officer, and harvest those and figure out how to apply those to our practice as a financial advisor. Now, I know everybody didn't come from being a police officer, but you can do this from whatever industry you're coming from. And let me tell you how I did it. First, I transferred the skill of adaptability. So an adaptable advisor is an advisor that knows what to do and say in any circumstance. They are prepared for anything, but are flexible and open to everything. As a police officer, your environment is rapidly updating in front of you all the time. Kind of like an advisor, when you sit down with a client, you might start with a conversation over here, but you might end up, in a completely different area than you expected. In the story I told you earlier, if I had gotten out of that car thinking the bad guy was going to run, and I wasn't paying attention to the environmental cues that were in front of me, we would have been in a gunfight in the middle of that intersection, and he would have been seriously hurt. He would have been. I'm just saying. So, and as I transferred this skill, I, began thinking about. I lost my place for a second. So, the next skill I transferred was my presence. And your presence as an advisor is the way you carry yourself, the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you ask questions, even down to the way you listen. And a police officer, when they're on duty, they have their uniform and their patrol car and their vest and their boots. They have a commanding presence about them. Now, I'm 6'6", 230 pounds, and when I was in my police uniform and I got out of the patrol car, I had a very good presence about me. And a presence can be used to diffuse many situations if it's used properly. Like in the story I told you, just my mere presence, just what I was physically doing, what I was physically saying, and my actions caused a bad guy to put his gun down and not shoot. What a powerful skill that is. So as I transferred this skill, I started thinking back to when I questioned suspects or victims as a police officer. I had to get all of the information from them so I could put it down in my report. And my report had to be so clear and concise that it could paint a picture for somebody who's reading it maybe 5 years down the road so that they could visualize what had actually happened without having been there. And as I started comparing that to the way I talk to my clients, I started laughing out loud, and it still makes me laugh out loud today because it was like two completely different people. The police officer's line of questioning was direct, assertive, to the point of almost being confrontational. And the financial advisor's was very passive and easily derailed. So I started thinking to myself, well, why wouldn't I treat each client meeting like an investigative interview? Because that is what it is in its most basic form, right? An investigation, not an interrogation. We're trying to get the information out of them voluntarily, which can be difficult to do at times. So I had to really trick my brain into pretending, and I really did this. I pretended that each meeting, the clients were going to hide their real reason for meeting me, and then it was my job to get that out of them. And I had to make it a habit. In order to make it a habit, you got to have repetition. So I had to do that before every client meeting, was pretend that it was more of an investigative interview than a financial meeting. So what we need to do is go back to your past life experiences or past careers and really think about all the different skills that you have. Because a lot of those skills can be transferred to your practice as an advisor, and when you do that, you'll constantly be updating yourself as a person, business owner, and a financial advisor. And like I said, this can be done from whatever industry you come from. Whether you are a police officer, a teacher, a realtor, an attorney, a construction worker. A realtor might not be able to transfer their knowledge of lead paint disclosures or the ins and outs of selling a house, but they might have a superior client experience. And a teacher, they might not be able to transfer their skill of grading papers or decorating their classroom, but creating a lesson plan is very similar to how we create a financial plan for a client going forward. So what I would challenge you with is to go back to your office after this trip and find one thing that you'd like to get better at in your practice, whether it's better at marketing, better at asking questions, taking better client notes, whatever it is, and think back to a time in your life when you've had to use that skill in a similar way, and I'd be willing to bet you could find that you had used it before and that you could transfer it to your practice. You just have to adapt how it's used. So that's it. Thank you very much.